Hello everyone and welcome to this video on modelling components in Fusion 360. In this video we're going to be modelling the angle support component that you can see on screen now. If you would like to follow along with this exercise you can find an engineering drawing for the component in the video description below. Okay, let's have a bit of a think about how we're going to model this particular component. So we can see that we have this L-shaped section of material here. It would seem very straightforward to create this using an extrude feature. But then we have this angled shape on the top of the component. Now it looks as though this would be relatively easy to create as an extrude, but we actually have no face on our component which we could extrude a sketch from. So in order to create this component we're going to have to use something called construction geometry. What we're going to do is we're going to create a construction plane which lies across this front surface of this particular angled bit of geometry, and then we're going to use that to extrude material at the correct angle into the main body of the component. Okay, so let's get started now. I'm going to create a new design for my component by going to the New Design tab on the top of the Fusion 360 window. And then I'm going to go to Create Sketch. For this particular sketch, I'm going to sketch on the ZY plane. So I'm going to click the orange box that represents the ZY plane. Now the first sketch that I'm going to create will be the L section of geometry. So I'm going to go to my line tool and I'm going to roughly sketch in that shape starting at my model origin. Okay, so that's the correct shape, but as we know that's not the correct size as of yet, so we need to go to our sketch dimension tool, and I can tell from my engineering drawing that this is 200 millimeters long, 100 millimeters deep. Each of the webs are 25 millimeters. And because we've already constrained our sketch to start at the model origin, and that's all of the information we need to give the sketch at the minute, all my sketch lines have turned black, so this is a fully constrained sketch, so I can hit Finish Sketch. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to extrude this sketch, so I go to Create and Extrude, and it's automatically selected my profile for me. Again, if it hadn't done this, I would simply need to go to the Select arrow and click the Sketch Profile. Now to try and keep everything nice and centered about the model origin, instead of doing a one-sided extrude feature, I'm going to change this to a symmetric extrude. When we do a symmetric extrude we have two options for measurement, either half of the length or the whole length. I'm going to change this to whole length just because that's the information that I've got in the drawing, and I can tell from the engineering drawing that this is 120 millimeters wide. I'm happy with that, so I can finish the extrude feature, and now we can see that we've got the main L section of or the body of material. So the next thing I need to do is I need to create the construction plane. Now I can tell from my engineering drawing that this particular face here is at 45 degrees to the top face and is runs exactly through this front edge. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the Construct menu. I'm going to go to Plane at an Angle. Now the reference that we need to give this particular feature is an edge through which the plane must run. So we're going to give the feature the reference of this front edge here, and we can see now that we've got a construction plane, and if we grab the blue handle we can move this construction plane to any angle we want, and it's rotating about that edge that we've given it. Now, as I said, this is at 45 degrees to that top face, so we can manually enter 45 degrees and press enter. Now that we have this construction plane, we can actually sketch on it. So I'm going to go to Create and Create Sketch, and instead of picking a face like I would typically do for modeling components, I can pick this construction plane. Now looking at my engineering drawing, I can tell that I have a rectangle which is 70 millimeters centered about the component. So I'm going to get a 2-point rectangle. I'm going to start sketching on this edge. I'm going to make something which is approximately the right size, and then I'm going to go to my sketch dimension tool and make this 70 millimeters wide. I want to keep this feature centered about my components. The next thing I'm going to do is grab the line tool. I'm just going to put a line in to represent the center of my component, and then I'm going to click on this line, right click and hold, and turn this into construction geometry. And that means that I can use this line to construct other features, but it won't appear as a solid edge of a profile when I've finished the sketch. Now that I've got that line, I can make this rectangle symmetrical about that line. So if I go to constraints and I go to symmetry, and I can pick on one edge of the rectangle, the other edge, and then the center line, and it will make that rectangle symmetrical. I also know that there is a full round on the end of this rectangle, so I can create this by using a circle diameter tool and clicking on the very center of that line and moving outwards until I touch one of the edges. Now, some of my sketch lines are still blue, so I need to use my sketch dimension tool to make sure that I've got all of the information contained within this sketch. So I know that the distance from this front edge to the center of my circle is 80 millimeters. I know that there is a hole running through this particular feature, which is of diameter 35 millimeters, so I can get my circle diameter tool, put a diameter in here, and set that diameter to be 35 millimeters. I also know that there is a slot that runs across the front of this feature. Now, this isn't a feature that I can put in as part of the extrude feature. I'll need to do this manually later on, so I'm not going to put any details in for that just yet. And I can see that I've got lots of blue lines left, so what I've done is I've just grabbed a bit of my sketch geometry and tried to move it, and I can see that I've still got this degree of freedom here, which is unconstrained within my sketch. So the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to constraints and coincident, and I'm going to make the bottom line of this rectangle coincident with this the end, or the origin of my component rather. Once I've snapped those two bits of geometry together, I can see that all of my sketch lines have gone black, and I'm happy with that, so I can now press finish sketch. And if I rotate my component, we can see that we've now got a sketch which is at the correct angle, which just sort of sits in space, but we can now use this to create an extrude feature. So I go to create and extrude, and I'm going to pick all of the relevant geometry that I want to extrude, and I now want to extrude this backwards into my component. Now by default, Fusion has assumed that I want to use this as a cutting or a cutting extrude action. I don't want to do that. I want to add material to my component. So where it says operation, I need to change this to join. And I've just left the distance that I'm extruding this particular feature. I've done this manually because what I want to make sure that all of this profile fully intersects with my model, but I don't want to go so far that I've got lots of excess material that I need to get rid of later on. So about 125 or 120 millimeters seems about correct for this. I'm happy with that feature now, so I can press OK. Okay, so I've got the main geometry of my component there, but I need to do a lot of cleaning up. So I'm going to turn on my origin planes, and I'm going to do another sketch on the the ZY plane of my component. I'm going to go to create sketch, and what I want to do here is I want to sketch a rectangle which represents the underside of this L shape. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this to clear out all of this excess material I created in the last extrude feature. So one of the ways in which I can do this is I can use the project/include tool. So I go to create, project/include, and I want to project an edge. And in this case, I want to project this edge and this edge. So I click on both of those edges and press OK. And what we can see now is I have purple lines which are exactly on those edges of the geometry, and those are solid sketch lines within my sketch. So to finish this off, I'm going to get the line tool, and I'm just going to turn those projected lines into a rectangle. I can see that the inside of the rectangle is turned blue, meaning that I've got a closed profile, so I can click finish sketch, and now I can use that sketch to create an extrude feature. And this time, instead of making a new body, I want to make sure that I'm cutting material away. So in this particular case, I just need to make sure that I have, we'll just try that again, sorry. I just need to change the direction of the extrude feature to 2 sides and make sure that I'm clearing out enough material from underneath that component. I'm happy with that, so I can press OK. Okay, not too many operations left now, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the slot in the front of the component. So to do this, again, I'm going to sketch on the ZY plane. So I go to create sketch, select that plane, and again, I'm going to go to my line tool, and I want to sketch a slot in on here, on the front face of the original extrude feature. Actually, before I use that line tool, I think I'm going to use the project/include tool, and I'm just going to project this front edge. Then I can go to the line tool, and I can sketch something which is approximately the right shape. And then I can go to my sketch dimension tool, and I can ensure that I've got the correct dimensions for this slot. So this is 35. This is 45. The depth is 10 millimeters. And again, I can go to extrude, and it's automatically picked that profile for me. In this particular case, there's a specific issue that might present itself. So if that profile hadn't been automatically picked, it can sometimes be quite difficult to pick a sketch when it's inside the material, because your mouse arrow will just pick up whatever is closest to the screen. So in that case, it's this front face of the component. In order to pick that particular sketch geometry, if you hover over it, left click and hold, and then you get this little selector menu, and you can run through all of the options. So I want the second profile here. Again, I want to change this to 2 sides, and I want to make sure that I remove enough material on each side to create that slot feature. The operation is automatically set to cut, which is correct, so I can press OK. Okay, we're getting closer now, so just a few more features to go. I know that each of the corners of the L-shaped piece of geometry have a radius of 25. So then that's the next thing that I'm going to create. So I'm going to go to modify and fillet and pick on each of those 4 edges. And set those to 25. I'm happy with that, so I can press the return key to confirm the operation. The next thing I know is that I've got holes in each of the corners, which from my engineering drawing I can tell are aligned with those radii, or those fillet features. So I'm going to go to create and hole, and I'm going to create a hole on this face, and I'm going to align it to that edge by clicking that arc as the second operation. I know that these are plain holes, so I can change the hole tap type to simple. I know that the diameter of these holes is 20 millimeters, so I can change the diameter to 20. And in this particular case, I know that the hole goes all the way through the component, so I can change the extent from distance to all. And I'm happy with that feature, so I can press OK. And I can create the other 3 holes in exactly the same way. So if we go to create and hole, pick on the top face and then pick the arc, it will align it for me. And I just need to make sure that I've set the options correctly for each of these holes. Okay, that's looking good. I think the last thing that we actually need to sort out here is that the hole for the angled piece of geometry goes all the way through the component, whereas in the component that we've modeled, it does not, and that's because we extruded this original L-shaped piece of geometry before we created the angle section. So all we're going to do here is we're going to sketch on this front face of the component. We're going to project the edge for this hole that we've already created, and then we are going to extrude that all the way through the component to ensure that we have a hole feature, or we have a hole running all the way through the component. I'm happy with that now. As a final check, I'll just have a look at the number of bodies I've got in my component. I can see that I've only got one body of material, and that is the entire component. I can tell that the geometry is identical to the reference component, so at that stage we are finished. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.